Title: He laughed at the veteran restoring a Warbird, then a colonel saw her wings. Hook: Hey, man. You sure you know which end the polish goes on? The young airman's voice dripped with condescension. He saw a gray-haired woman with a museum piece. He had no idea he was talking to a legend. The cavernous hangar hummed with the low thrum of industrial fans, a modern sound that seemed to shy away from Bay 4. Here, the air tasted different. It was a mix of jet fuel, yes, but underneath it lay the fainter, almost sacred sense of old oil, worn leather, and time itself. In the center of this pocket of history stood a P-51 Mustang, its silver skin gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. And beside it, a woman. Evelyn Reed, at 65, moved with a quiet, deliberate grace. Her hands, though showing the fine lines of age, were steady as she worked a soft cloth over the Mustang's fuselage. Her silver-gray hair was pulled back in a neat, no-nonsense ponytail, and her eyes, a pale, clear blue, were focused on her task with an intensity that shut out the world. She was restoring the plane, not just polishing it. She was coaxing its soul back to the surface. On the cowling, painted in elegant, sharp script, was the name, Athena's Arrow. Seriously, I think you're rubbing the paint off. The voice, sharp and laced with the unearned confidence of youth, belonged to Senior Airman Torres. He swaggered into her space, flanked by two younger airmen who mirrored his smirk, their crisp, modern fatigues a stark contrast to Evelyn's worn denim jeans and simple cotton shirt. Evelyn didn't look up. She continued her slow, circular motion, feeling the almost imperceptible friction of the cloth against the cool aluminum. Her silence was a wall, one Torres seemed determined to breach. "I'm talking to you," he pressed, taking another step closer, invading her personal space. "We got a work order for a full diagnostic on this bay's fire suppression system. You're going to have to move this thing." He gestured dismissively at the Mustang. One of his companions snickered. "My kid builds models of these. Maybe you could help him with the decals, ma'am. Seems more your speed." The casual sexism, layered over the ageism, was as predictable as it was tiresome. Evelyn finished her circular wipe, straightened her back with a soft sigh that was more about patience than fatigue, and finally turned to face them. Her gaze was level, her expression unreadable. She didn't see three airmen, she saw three boys, puffed up in uniforms they hadn't yet earned the right to fill. "This aircraft has been cleared to be here," she said, her voice calm and even, carrying a low resonance that surprised them. "The work order for your diagnostic can be rescheduled." Torres's smirk tightened into a sneer. He wasn't used to being contradicted, especially not by a civilian woman who looked like she should be baking cookies, not giving orders on his turf. "I don't think so. I'm the senior airman on this detail, and I say it happens now. I need to see your base credentials and your restoration permit. Now." The confrontation had started to draw an audience. A few mechanics working on a nearby F-35 paused, their curiosity piqued. They saw the classic standoff, a young buck asserting his authority against an obstacle. "That won't be necessary," a new voice cut in. It was firm, female, and carried an immediate, cutting authority. Lieutenant Miller, a young officer with sharp, intelligent eyes and a bearing that radiated competence, strode into the bay. She was on her way to a pre-flight briefing but had seen the cluster of airmen cornering the older woman. Something about the predatory posture of the men had set her teeth on edge. "Lieutenant," Torres said, snapping to a semblance of attention, clearly flustered. "Ma'am." This civilian was being uncooperative. "She has full clearance, Torres," Miller stated, her eyes not on him, but on the magnificent P-51. She was a history enthusiast and knew exactly what this plane was. The wing commander himself approved her access. "This aircraft is a protected heritage asset." The other two airmen visibly deflated, but Torres's pride was stung. He had been publicly corrected by a female officer in front of his subordinates and a growing audience. The humiliation curdled into resentment. "With all due respect, Lieutenant," he said, his tone bordering on insubordinate, "she should have stated that and had her credentials visible. We're just trying to do our jobs." His eyes slid back to Evelyn, a venomous glint in them. He wasn't done. He needed to win, to reassert his dominance. And he decided this quiet, gray-haired woman would be the one to pay the price for his bruised ego. Lieutenant Miller's intervention should have ended the matter. The chain of command had spoken. But for Senior Airman Torres, it had become personal. He felt his authority, his very masculinity, challenged in front of his peers. He looked at Evelyn, who had remained placid throughout the exchange, and saw not a person, but an object of his frustration. "I still need to see your identification," Torres insisted, his voice hard. "And the permit. Base regulations are clear." Lieutenant Miller's jaw tightened. The request was technically within regulations, but his tone made it an act of aggression. She gave Evelyn a small, almost imperceptible nod, signaling her to comply just to de-escalate the situation. With a sigh, Evelyn reached for the simple canvas tote bag resting on a nearby crate. It was a far cry from a military-issue briefcase, filled with polishing cloths, a thermos, and a well-loved paperback novel. Her movements were unhurried as she retrieved a simple, worn leather portfolio. "What else you got in there, Grandma?" Torres sneered, his bravado returning as he felt he was regaining control. "Knitting needles. A photo album of the grandkids." Before Evelyn could even open the portfolio, in a move of shocking disrespect, Torres reached out and snatched the entire tote bag from her grasp. "Let's just speed this up, shall we?" The act was so sudden and so egregious that a collective gasp went through the small crowd of mechanics. Lieutenant Miller took a half-step forward, her face flushing with anger. "Airman, that is enough." But Torres was already appending the bag. Its contents spilled onto the smooth, oil-stained concrete floor. A red thermos clattered loudly. A half-eaten apple rolled under the Mustang's wing. And a small, creased black and white photograph fluttered down, landing face up. It showed a much younger Evelyn, her face bright and confident, grinning in front of an F-16 Fighting Falcon, her flight suit adorned with patches. Torres barely glanced at it. "Look at that, from the Stone Age," he scoffed, his attention drawn to the leather portfolio that had fallen out. He picked it up and flipped it open, his fingers clumsy and intrusive as he rummaged through its pockets. And then he saw it. Tucked into a hidden flap of worn leather was a small, tarnished silver pin. It was a pair of pilot's wings, but they were different from the standard-issue ones he was used to seeing. These were heavier, more ornate, with a wreath surrounding a star set above the shield. A combat star. They were USAF Command pilot wings. As Torres's profane fingers touched the pin, the sterile quiet of the hangar vanished from Evelyn's mind. The smell of jet fuel was replaced by the acrid scent of cordite and burning sand. She was no longer a 65-year-old woman in a quiet hangar. For a fraction of a second, the world dissolved into a flash of violent, visceral memory. The percussive roar of a General Electric engine at full afterburner filled her ears, a physical pressure that vibrated through her very bones. The sky outside her canopy wasn't blue, but a hazy, sun-bleached tan, pockmarked with the dirty black puffs of anti-aircraft fire. She could feel the familiar, violent rattle of the M61 Vulcan cannon firing from its mount, the vibration running through the control stick, up her arm, and into her soul. A MiG-23, trailing a plume of black smoke, tumbled past her wing. An urgent, digitized voice screamed, "Missile! Missile!" in her headset. The memory was less than a heartbeat. An echo of a life lived at the razor's edge of death. And then it was gone. She was back in the silent hangar. She looked at the young man holding her past in his hands, his face a mask of smug ignorance, and she felt nothing but a vast, hollow pity. He was a child playing with relics he could never comprehend. Lieutenant Miller saw it all. She saw the bag snatched, the contents scattered, the airman's sneer. Most importantly, she saw the flicker in the old woman's eyes, a momentary fire, a hardening of her features that was almost frightening in its intensity before it subsided back into that unnerving, profound calm. The name on the permit she had glimpsed earlier, Evelyn Reed, clicked with the name of the plane, Athena's Arrow. Her mind, a repository of aviation history, began racing, connecting dots from articles and documentaries she had devoured. It couldn't be. Could it? Torres, oblivious, held the portfolio like a trophy. The unique wings confused him, but he was too committed to his power play to admit it. He decided to push his advantage to its absolute peak. "Alright, that's it. You've had your chance," he announced, pulling out his smartphone with a flourish. He was looking at Evelyn, but he was performing for his audience, for his friends, for the mechanics, for the officer he now sought to dominate with his procedural diligence. "I'm calling security forces. We'll have you trespassed from the base. Maybe they'll recommend a psych evaluation to see if you're fit to be wandering around an active airfield." He was savoring the humiliation, twisting the knife. He put the phone to his ear, beginning a fake conversation for effect. "Yes, this is Senior Airman Torres in Hangar 4. I have an unauthorized civilian, appears to be in a state of mental confusion, refusing to cooperate." It was a vile, career-ending performance of arrogance. As Torres spun his tale of a confused old woman, Lieutenant Miller took 2 steps back, melting into the massive shadow of an F-22's wing. She pulled out her own phone. She wasn't calling security forces. She scrolled through her contacts, her thumb hovering for a moment over a number she had been given at an officer's orientation but had never dreamed of using. The wing command post. The nerve center of the entire base. She pressed the call button. "This is Lieutenant Miller in Hangar 4, she said, her voice low but urgent, shielded from Torres's drama. "I have a situation here involving an elderly civilian." She paused, listening to the bored, bureaucratic voice on the other end. "Yes, sir." The woman restoring the P-51 Mustang. Her name is Evelyn Reed. She spelled it out. R-E-D. She is currently being detained by Senior Airman Torres. Miller chose her words with surgical precision. "Sir, I believe you need to get the wing commander. Immediately." The tone on the other end of the line changed instantly. The bureaucratic drone vanished, replaced by sharp, alert attention. There was a muffled shout, the distinct sound of a heavy chair scraping back violently across a tile floor. The audience in the hangar couldn't hear the words, but the sudden shift in the atmosphere around Lieutenant Miller was unmistakable. Help was not just on the way. The cavalry had been scrambled. And it was coming in hot. Inside the wing command building, a sterile, climate-controlled world away from the grease and noise of the hangars, Colonel Anya Sharma was on the phone, her face a storm cloud of annoyance. An unscheduled, Priority 1 patch-through from the command post about a hangar dispute was the last thing she needed. She was a woman who commanded a fleet of the most advanced fighter jets on the planet. She didn't have time for petty squabbles. "What is it, Lieutenant?" she said into her headset, her voice clipped, her accent a crisp blend of her Indian heritage and a career in the American military. "Sir, it's about the civilian in Hangar 4, Lieutenant Miller's voice came through, steady despite the circumstances. "The one with the Mustang. Her name is Evelyn Reed." The name hung in the air. Colonel Sharma's entire posture changed. She went from leaning back in her ergonomic leather chair to sitting bolt upright, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of her desk. Her sharp, dark eyes darted to a framed print on her office wall, a painting of F-16s, part of the 388th Fighter Wing, screaming over a desert landscape. "Say that name again, Lieutenant," the colonel commanded, her voice now dangerously quiet. "Reed, ma'am. Evelyn Reed." Colonel Sharma slammed a hand down on her desk, not in anger, but as a point of exclamation. "Sergeant," she roared at her aide in the outer office. "Get my car. Now. And get Dr. Tanaka from the base historian's office on the line. Tell him to meet me at Hangar 4 on the double. Tell him it's about Athena." The aide, a young staff sergeant, scrambled to comply, startled by the raw, explosive urgency in his commander's voice. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" Sharma was already shrugging on her service coat, her movements sharp and precise. "Do you have any idea who that is?" she said, her voice a low growl of disbelief and fury. "That's not just an Evelyn Reed. That's the Evelyn Reed. They called her the Valkyrie. We have a living Air Force Cross recipient on our base, and one of my airmen is," she trailed off, her jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped. "God help him." Back in Hangar 4, Senior Airman Torres was basking in the final, fleeting moments of his perceived victory. He had ended his fake call with a decisive, "on their way," and was now standing with his arms crossed, a smug guardian of order. He was so wrapped up in his own drama that he didn't hear it at first, the faint, distant wail of a siren. But it wasn't a single siren. It was a chorus. The sound grew exponentially, screaming closer. A black staff car, lights flashing but siren now silent, skidded to a halt just outside the massive bay doors, blocking the afternoon sun and casting a long, ominous shadow. It was followed immediately by a security forces truck and a white command van. The ordinary rhythm of the base had just been shattered. The hangar went dead silent. The mechanic stopped leaning and stood at unconscious attention. Torres froze, his phone still in his hand, his mouth slightly agape. The doors of the black car burst open. Colonel Sharma emerged, her uniform immaculate, her face a mask of controlled thunder. She was followed by the base's highest-ranking enlisted man, a chief master sergeant, and a harried-looking civilian clutching a tablet, Dr. Kenji Tanaka, the base historian. They didn't walk, they marched. Their footsteps echoed with a purpose that sucked all the air out of the vast space. They strode past the petrified airmen as if they were invisible, their focus entirely on the older woman standing beside the vintage fighter plane. Colonel Sharma came to a halt 3 paces in front of Evelyn Reed. In the echoing silence, she planted her feet, brought her heels together with a sharp click, and executed the most profound, respectful salute of her entire career. Her hand was a blade, quivering with intensity, her eyes locked on Evelyn's. "Ma'am," the colonel's voice boomed, resonating through the hangar. "It is an absolute honor to have you on my base." Evelyn, who had watched the dramatic procession with a calm, knowing expression, slowly raised a hand in a frail ghost of a salute. It was less a military gesture and more a simple acknowledgement, woman to woman, warrior to warrior. The colonel held her salute, her arm a ramrod of respect. Then, she turned her head just enough to fix Senior Airman Torres with a glare that could have melted steel. "Airman," she roared, the sound making Torres physically jump. "Do you have any earthly idea who you are speaking to?" She didn't wait for an answer that would never come. She gestured to the historian. "Dr. Tanaka. If you would." The historian stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly as he swiped his tablet. He cleared his throat, his voice taking on the formal cadence of a citation. "Evelyn Reed. Commissioned in the United States Air Force in 1985, one of the first women selected for direct combat pilot training. Assigned to the 388th Fighter Wing. She flew 52 combat missions in the F-16C Fighting Falcon during Operation Desert Storm, flying this very aircraft's spiritual successor, which she christened Athena's Arrow." A collective, barely audible gasp went through the assembled airmen and mechanics. Torres's face had gone from cocky to confused to utterly, devastatingly pale. He looked as if he might be sick. The historian continued, his voice growing stronger with the weight of the words. "She is credited with 2 confirmed aerial victories. Her commendations include the Distinguished Flying Cross with Valor Device, the Air Medal with 4 oak leaf clusters, a Purple Heart, and the Air Force Cross." The last 3 words fell into the silence like anvils. Air Force Cross. The second highest award for valor, just below the Medal of Honor. An honor so rare, most service members go their entire careers without ever meeting a recipient. The airman looked at Evelyn not as an old woman, but as a creature from a legend. The Air Force Cross was awarded for her actions on February 26, 1991, Dr. Tanaka read, his voice thick with emotion. During a deep strike mission, then Captain Reed's wingman was shot down by a surface-to-air missile. Disobeying direct orders to return to base, she remained alone in heavily defended enemy airspace, engaging multiple enemy fighters and suppressing anti-aircraft positions for 27 minutes until a combat search and rescue team could be vectored in. Despite critical damage to her own aircraft and a shrapnel wound to her shoulder, she successfully defended the downed pilot from capture until help arrived. Her actions are directly credited with saving the life of a fellow American pilot that day. The story hung in the air, immense and humbling. The power dynamic in the hangar had not just been inverted, it had been annihilated. Colonel Sharma finally lowered her salute, her eyes still locked on Torres. "Inside Ms. Reed's portfolio," she said, her voice dangerously low, "which I believe you are still holding, you will find her original, hand-engraved command pilot wings. They were pinned on her uniform by General Chuck Horner himself, the commander of all coalition air forces." Trembling, Torres looked down at the portfolio in his hand as if it were radioactive. Colonel Sharma took a step toward the young airman, her shadow falling over him. "You are a disgrace to that uniform," she seethed, her voice a low, controlled fury. "To this Air Force. To everything those wings on your chest are supposed to represent. You look at this woman and you see an inconvenience. You see a target for your pathetic, sexist jokes. I see the woman who flew through hell itself to guarantee the very freedom you take for granted every single day you wake up." She turned to the Chief Master Sergeant, who was standing by with a notepad. "Chief, I want their names. All three of them. They will be reporting to my office at 0600 tomorrow morning for a personal, and I assure you, very intense, lesson in Air Force heritage. They will start by writing a 10,000-word essay on the history of women in combat aviation. Then we'll see if they are fit to continue wearing this uniform." The airmen, led by a ghostly white Torres, began to stammer, their words a pathetic, jumbled mess of "ma'am" and "sorry" and "we didn't know." Evelyn held up a hand. The gesture was small, but it commanded the attention of everyone in the room. Even Colonel Sharma fell silent. She looked at Torres, and in her clear blue eyes, there was no anger. There was no triumph. There was only a deep, weary sadness that was somehow more damning than the colonel's rage. "Son," Evelyn said, her voice raspy but carrying clearly in the stilled hangar. She gently patted the cool metal of the Mustang's fuselage. "This plane, she isn't just a machine. She's not just metal and paint and wire. She's a promise." She looked from Torres to the other young men, her gaze sweeping over the mechanics and even Lieutenant Miller. "She represents a promise that young men my father's age, terrified and thousands of miles from home, made to other boys who were dying on the ground. My F-16, the other Athena, was the same kind of promise. We didn't fight for parades. We didn't do it for the medals." Her eyes settled back on Torres. "We did it for each other. Respect isn't about saluting a uniform or fearing a rank. It's about understanding the promises that were kept so you could be standing here, safe, in this hangar today. It's about seeing the person, not the package they come in." Colonel Sharma, her expression softening slightly, gently took the portfolio from Torres's nerveless fingers and handed it back to its rightful owner. Evelyn took it, her fingers tracing the cracked leather, before tucking it safely back into her tote bag. The fallout was swift and decisive. The next morning, Torres and his two friends found themselves not in the colonel's office, but in a sterile classroom with Dr. Tanaka for the first of many long lessons. Colonel Sharma, true to her word, mandated a new, base-wide training program focused on the contributions and sacrifices of previous generations, with the story of Evelyn Reed and Athena's arrow as its opening chapter. A week passed. The buzz about the incident in Hangar 4 slowly faded. One evening, Torres, off-duty and in civilian clothes, found himself walking past the hangars. He saw the main door to Bay 4 was partially open, a warm yellow light spilling out onto the tarmac. He hesitated, his heart pounding with a mixture of shame and a strange, new curiosity. Then, he took a breath and walked inside. Evelyn was there, just as before, quietly working on the Mustang's engine cowling. She looked up as he approached, her expression unreadable. The young man stood in the shadows for a long moment, wrestling with his disgrace. Finally, he found his voice. "Ma'am," he said, the word small in the vast space. Evelyn stopped her work and turned, really looking at him. She saw not the arrogant bully from the week before, but a humbled young man, his eyes full of a remorse that was deep and genuine. "Ma'am," Torres began again, his voice cracking. I was hoping, could you tell me about her? About Athena Zero?" Evelyn Reed held his gaze for a long moment. Then, a small, genuine smile touched the corners of her mouth, the first one Torres had ever seen. It transformed her face, chasing away some of the weariness. She gestured with her rag toward an old wooden crate sitting nearby. "Pull up a crate, son," Evelyn said, patting the gleaming silver wing of her old warrior. "Let me tell you about the promises she keeps." The courage of heroes like Evelyn Reed should never be forgotten. If you were moved by her story, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more incredible stories of service and sacrifice. What does true respect mean to you? Let us know in the comments below, and please, comment with respect for the veterans in our community.